A black man in his 50s, lives by himself, eats dinner standing at the kitchen counter at 9:47 p.m. with a fork in one hand and his phone in the other, sound on 6. Most folks see that and assume something went wrong somewhere down the line. I'm Frank. I'm here to tell you that picture is closer to peace than the world realizes, and the reasons trace back further than divorce papers, dating apps, or any conversation you've ever heard about single black men. You probably know him. He's your uncle, your boy from work, your cousin who pulls up to the cookout, eats 2 plates, gives everybody a real hug, leaves at 8 and is home by 8:30 with his shoes off and Earth, Wind & Fire playing at the volume he likes. He's not avoiding the family. He had enough of them for one day. That's a different thing. Let me describe his house. The remote is exactly where he left it. The bathroom counter has 3 items on it. The thermostat reads 67 because that's where he wants it to read. There's a chair in the living room, his chair, and it has a slight permanent dip on the right side from how he sits in it. The kitchen smells like whatever he cooked last, and whatever he cooked last, he wanted. Nobody asked him to use less salt. Nobody told him the music was too loud at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. The man set up a sanctuary, and most people walked into it and called him lonely. He's a lot of things. Lonely isn't usually one of them. Here's what the numbers actually say. According to census data analyzed by Black Demographics in 2023, half of African Americans had never been married. Not divorced, never married. Compare that to 34% of all Americans, and you start to see that a whole generation has been rewriting the rules without anybody clapping for them. A 2025 study published in the Russell Sage Foundation Journal looked at 4 decades of census data, 6.8 million people, and found black Americans are more likely to live alone than white Americans across nearly every age group. And the share of older men living by themselves has climbed steadily since 1980. Here's the part that ought to surprise you. A 2023 study published in Aging Research Journals found that older black adults who transitioned from living with a spouse or partner to living alone reported increased psychological well-being. Their white counterparts who made the same transition reported decreased well-being. Same change in living arrangement, opposite emotional outcome. The data wasn't ambiguous, it was a measurable flip. So when somebody asks if black Gen X men who live alone actually prefer it, the answer for a lot of them is yes, and there's research backing them up. Now let's talk about why. Think about the house a lot of these men grew up in. I'm not talking about every house. I'm talking about a pattern that shows up more than people admit. 3 or 4 kids in 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a waiting line in the morning, a cousin sleeping on the couch for a stretch nobody explained, an auntie staying for a week that turned into a year, somebody's man living there for a minute and you weren't supposed to ask. The TV in the living room ran a different show than the TV in the back room, and both were loud. Sunday dinner had 8 people in a kitchen built for 3. The phone rang and somebody yelled your name from across 2 rooms. That kind of house didn't have crowded rooms. The whole house was a crowd, and you lived inside it. Privacy was a luxury you stole. You waited till everybody fell asleep so you could sit on the kitchen floor and think. You read in the bathroom because the bathroom had a lock. You took the long way home from school because the walk was the only time nobody asked you a question. A closed door wasn't a real boundary. Your mama could open it without knocking. Your big sister could open it because she said so. Your little cousin could open it because the door wasn't his idea. A black boy in that house learned a lot of things. He learned how to share. He learned how to wait his turn. He learned how to keep certain thoughts to himself because there were too many ears in the house to risk them out loud. He also learned what quiet feels like when it's rationed. He learned that solitude was a resource so rare you had to schedule it for 1 a.m. with the lights off and your headphones on. Some of those boys grew up to be men who couldn't sit still in an empty room. The quiet made them itch. But a lot of them, more than the world realizes, grew up into men who finally got that quiet at 35, or 42, or 51, and decided they were never letting it go again. That's what living alone is for a lot of black Gen X men. He's not running from people. The years of privacy he never got as a boy, he's finally collecting them, one Saturday morning at a time. Let me describe what he does with all that quiet. He cooks, and he cooks slow. He's chopping onions at his pace, with his knife, on his board, while a Marvin Gaye record plays at the volume he picked. He's the one who decided salmon for dinner. He's the one who decided the salmon needed lemon. He's the one who'll eat it at 7:14 or 9:42, depending on what kind of day it was, and nobody is going to sigh because dinner is late. He listens to music people forgot how to listen to. Curtis Mayfield with the verses that didn't make it onto the radio. Phyllis Hyman the way she was meant to be heard, which is alone, in a dim room, with a drink in your hand. He's got speakers nobody else gets to touch. He sits in his chair and lets a full album play start to finish, the way it was built. He'll put a single track on repeat for an hour because he heard something in it he wants to hear again, and there's nobody in the next room asking him to change it. He fixes things, tinkers in the garage, restores a piece of furniture his grandmama left him,
replaces the kitchen faucet himself, even though it took him 3 trips to the hardware store and a YouTube video he muttered at. He grills on a Tuesday in October because he wants ribs on a Tuesday in October, and there's no reason he can't. He reads. He watches the game at the volume that doesn't aggravate him. He goes to bed when he's tired and gets up when he's awake. He runs the AC at 67, and nobody is in the next room calling it a meat locker. The man is running a one-person country, and the budget is balanced, and the trains are on time. A lot of folks look at that life and call it lonely. Curated is closer to the truth. He picked every single thing in that house, including the silence. Now, here's where I have to be honest with you, because I'm not in the business of selling you a fantasy. There is a real version of this where a black man closes his door and stops opening it, where the solitude has stopped being a choice and turned into a wall he's hiding behind. A 2024 article from USC's Center for Health Journalism pointed out that single black men are one of the most overlooked groups in the loneliness conversation, partly because the culture trained them to read vulnerability as weakness. And research published in 2025 tracking black men from their parents' generation, the men now in their 80s, found higher baseline social isolation than other groups, which tells us that without intentional connection, isolation can drift in as a man ages. So the truth has 2 sides. Side 1, a lot of these men are not lonely. They built a peaceful place and they're protective of it, and the world calling it sad doesn't make it sad. Side 2, solitude can curdle if a man stops calling his people back, stops opening the door for company that does come around, stops letting anybody close enough to know how he's actually doing. The good ones know the difference. They live alone, they like it, and they keep their people close. They got 2 or 3 numbers in their phone they can call at any hour. They got somebody who'd notice if they didn't show up for the cookout 3 weekends in a row. A man who lives alone well stays selective about company without sliding into isolation. There's a difference, and most of the men I'm describing know it in their bones. Let me tell you something else nobody wants to say out loud. A lot of these men were married once, or they tried to be, or they had a long stretch of being somebody's partner, somebody's daddy, somebody's everything. They were the one who paid the bills, fixed the problems, handled the family, and got told all the ways they were doing it wrong while they did it. They came home tired and got managed at the door. So when the marriage ended, or the kids grew up and left, and the man was alone in a house with only his name on the lease, a part of him exhaled in a way he hadn't exhaled since he was 11 years old. It wasn't relief. Relief is too small a word. It was the feeling of being allowed to take up space without performance, to not be on call, to not be observed, to not be evaluated for how he loaded a dishwasher or
what he watched on TV or how he spent a Saturday. And once he tasted that, a lot of these men quietly decided they weren't trading it back. He'll still date. He'll still take somebody out, cook for her, spend a weekend, mean every word of it. He's just not combining households for somebody who won't add peace to the equation. He'd rather sleep in his own bed and call her in the morning than wake up to somebody asking him why he stayed up late. That's a recalibration. The heart didn't close, the math just changed. Here's another piece of the puzzle. A lot of black Gen X men grew up in homes where one person ran the whole operation. Mama set the schedule. Mama set the temperature. Mama decided what was for dinner. Mama controlled the TV. Mama set the curfew, the rules, the tone, the volume. A lot of these boys had no real say in their own environment until they moved out. And by then, a lot of them moved straight into a relationship where somebody else was running the schedule, setting the temperature, deciding what was for dinner. So for a black Gen X man to live alone at 52, that might literally be the first time in his entire life that the schedule belongs to him. You think he's given that up? You can hear him laughing. Let me describe a Saturday at his house. He's up at 6:14 a.m. because his body wakes him up. Coffee, the cup he likes, the chair, the window. He's watching the sun do whatever the sun is doing. The phone is in the other room. Nobody is talking to him yet, and he's not talking to anybody yet. He sits in his own thoughts for an hour like a man with a paid-off house. Then maybe he goes for a walk. Maybe he hits the gym. Maybe he stays in the chair another 2 hours. The activity doesn't matter. What matters is that the morning belongs to him, fully, with no negotiation. By noon, he might call his mama, talk to a friend, stop by his daughter's place if he's got one. He's not a hermit. He decided the morning is sacred and the afternoon is shared, and he's not budging on either. By evening, he's cooking, listening, eating, watching, or sitting on the porch. The phone rings if it rings. He'll get to it when he wants to get to it. That's a man at peace with his own company. That's a man who built a life around himself instead of around being convenient to other people. You can call that selfish. He'll let you call it that. He's not asking your permission. There's something else worth saying here. A lot of black Gen X men spent their working lives in environments where they had to be careful. Careful at the job, careful in the parking lot, careful at the bank, the doctor, the gas station, the school meeting, careful with their tone, careful with how loud they laughed, careful with how big they took up a hallway. Home was supposed to be the one place that careful stopped. But for some of them, home brought a different kind of careful. Careful with the wife, careful with the kids, careful with the in-laws, careful with the noise, careful with the schedule, careful with the way you came in the door so you didn't bring the wrong energy. A man can only be careful for so many decades before his body starts asking for somewhere to be uncareful. His own house, alone, with the door closed, is where he gets to be uncareful. He can sit how he wants. He can talk to himself. He can play the same song 6 times in a row. He can laugh out loud at a joke nobody else heard. He can be a whole human being with no audience. Call that isolation if you want. He'd call it restoration, and he'd be the one who knows. Now, real talk for the family. If you got a brother, a cousin, a father, a friend who lives alone, and you love him, don't make him defend it. He's tired of explaining it. He's tired of being asked when he's going to find somebody. He's tired of cousins setting him up at the cookout. He's tired of being treated like an unfinished project that just needs the right woman to complete. What he actually wants is for you to call him. Pull up to his place sometimes. Eat what he cooks. Sit in his chair if he lets you. Ask him real questions about real things in his life. Don't try to fix him. And if you're him, the black Gen X man living alone, hearing me right now, I'll say one thing to you straight. Keep 2 or 3 people close. The kind who'd notice if you went quiet for too long. The kind you'd call at 2 a.m. if something bad happened. You don't need a household to have a circle, but you need a circle. A man with a peaceful house and 3 real friends is one of the wealthiest men in America. You can quote me on that. Let me close with this. The story about black Gen X men who live alone is not a story about failure. It's not a story about who didn't get chosen, or who couldn't keep a marriage together, or who's running from love. Those framings are lazy, and they miss what's actually happening. What's actually happening is a generation of black men who grew up sharing rooms with 3 siblings, with cousins, with grandmothers, with the constant hum of family, who learned that solitude was a treasure you had to steal in the middle of the night. Those boys grew into men. Those men finally got houses with their names on the lease. And in those houses, they discovered something they had been chasing since they were 9 years old. A quiet morning, a loud song, a meal at midnight, a chair that nobody else sits in. He's home. After 50-some years of waiting his turn, he's home. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.